Hey guys, we're going to do a little different video here today, diagnosing a problem on my 2019 Ford F-150. It's the 3.5 liter Ecoboost with a 10-speed, the 10R80 transmission. Over the past couple months, I've started to notice this kind of shuddering feel in the transmission, particularly in high gears when I've got cruise control on and the engine's under 2,000 RPM. And typically this is happening as I'm going like up a hill with the cruise control on, or passing somebody on the interstate or something like that, and I give it just a little bit of acceleration. And what it manifests as is kind of a shuddering feel in the back end of the truck. I know some people online describe it as like going over rumble strips. I suppose it's kind of like that, but it feels a little bit like a slip or something. So what I'm doing is I'd like to diagnose and ensure that it's most likely the torque converter versus a slip in the clutches of the transmission. Earlier, about a month or so ago, when I first started noticing this problem, one of the approaches I took was to replace the valve body, give new fluids and a new filter to the transmission in my first attempt to kind of address this, because that seemed like a relatively inexpensive part. It's still a couple $100s for the valve body, but it was at least accessible, and it's something I didn't have to tear too deep into the truck to get to. So I did that, and it didn't fix my problem, disappointingly. So now I'm kind of chasing down this potential for a torque converter slip issue. So the way that I'm going to do this is I've got 4Scan up, and I'll show you here in a minute. 4Scan up, and we have the torque converter slip desired PID, as well as the slip actual PID, and then the torque converter line pressure being monitored at the same time. And what I'm looking for is a drastic difference between the desired and the actual slip of the torque converter. And I think it'll be pretty evident that when I start getting this shake feel, that the torque converter slip actual will be quite a deviation from the desired position. At least that's what I'm expecting to see. So let me get this set up. I'm going to drive down the road a little further. I'm just on one of the back roads right now, but there is a particular hill where I tend to have this problem most frequently. So I wanted to get this set up and record that while I'm doing it, so you guys can kind of see what it looks like when this problem kind of manifests itself and what the engine's reporting back to the user. Okay, so I've got the 4Scan window up. It's the oscilloscope under the kind of the monitoring tab. The top line is the torque converter desired slip. Right now it's zeroed out. I'm just in 10th gear going down the road. The middle line, the green line, is the torque converter actual slip. So I know there's some allowance, some threshold that it can slip a little bit. Right now it's showing -3 to 7 is my min and max. And then this bottom line, the blue line, is the torque converter line pressure, and it's anywhere between 65 and I'll call it 105 psi. I don't know what the spec is to say what's normal, but when your torque converter is locked out, you would have zero slip in the red line, and your pressure would be high. And if everything was working great, I think you'd expect to have the green line, the slip actual, match the slip desired. So the green and red lines should be lined up. Like I said, I'd expect to see a little bit of deviation, just because there's got to be some kind of threshold. It's a fluid manifold kind of body of the torque converter, so there's going to be a little bit of slip naturally, but we'll see. I'm coming up on the hill here shortly that tends to cause it to slip, and we'll see if it spikes out on this right hand side of the screen. Okay, so I felt that slip in the truck. It's kind of slipping right now, and you can really see that green line jumping up and down. Now the difference in slip as far as RPM is -7 to 20 is our min and max on that. I've got one more hill here before I come to a flat where we'll see the problem again potentially. I apologize, there's a bit of a glare on the screen, but hopefully you guys can see that all right. So the torque converter's evened out pretty well. You can see that I was shifting gears a little bit naturally, so the red line's jumping around back on this left-hand side. I'm still coming down the road, and now I'm headed up this hill, so now I'm experiencing the slip again. So there's actually a decent amount of slip. It's the desired limit is between 0 and 4, and right now I'm jumping all around between -7 and 18, -7 and 20. So it seems like there's a little bit of slip on there. The line pressure is bleeding down now as I'm coming to a flat. It doesn't need to be quite as high to keep it locked out. It got as high as about 115. And now it says that the torque converter should be locked at 0 slip. I've got a little bit of dither because I'm not really under load. I'm kind of just coasting, and you can see the pressure is the same. Hey guys, we're going to get into this project now. So I described in the previous section of the video that we're doing a torque converter on my F-150. I've got the 2019, it's a 3.5 liter Ecoboost, and it's got the 10 speed, so the 10R80 transmission. And I've been noticing some kind of torque converter slip when going uphill under kind of like moderate acceleration before the transmission drops it a gear. So I went through and was kind of looking up different part numbers and things, looking at the parts diagram for these transmissions, and found that, you know, since my truck was released only 5 or 6 years ago, they've gone through 3 revisions of this torque converter. So I've got the latest version of that in hand. I just received it earlier this week. And maybe just a quick comment on that. You know, at least in my experience, if the part number change, if a revision drives a new part number to the point where it's visible at the next higher assembly level, so in my case at the truck assembly level, then that usually means that the change was big enough that there was an improvement that they wanted to be able to see. That had to be visible at the top level. So my hope is that this new torque converter has got enough of an improvement so as to be more robust and then not cause me to have to do this again. It's kind of a chilly day here. I'll have the space heater probably running in the garage a little bit. I'm dudded up, coveralls and such. So, you know, I'm hoping that as I get working, it'll warm up, or at least I'll warm up, and I'll be able to get a little bit better access by taking off this coverall. But I'll take you guys along for the ride here. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully I can get it done in a day or two. I have the time off. It's a Friday afternoon, so if it spills into Saturday, that's okay. But let's see how it goes. I've got the truck up on 4 jack posts. There's no real need to get it up real high. I think there's plenty of space underneath the truck just naturally to give you what you need as far as room for getting the transmission out. But what you do need to do is you need to be able to rotate your wheels by your drive shaft so that you can access all of the bolts that I'm going to get to here in a few minutes. So I've only got it just about an inch or so off the ground, enough that I can rotate the wheels. And I know that there are specific jack points, like on the frame, like I'm showing here. On the back side, I think there's another one just before it starts to taper up there on the left. But what I actually prefer to do is to put it under the rear axle. It just feels more steady that way. All right, we're set up here underneath the back end of the drive shaft. This is going to your rear diff at the rear axle. These are going to be, there's only 4 of them, but there's 4 of these 12.12 millimeter bolts coming through. I like to put, sorry about that, I like to put a little kind of a hash mark or something, you know, some way of indexing it so that when you put it all back together, you know how to align things. I'll call it the north end of the truck. Going back and rolling over to this side. This interface with the rear of your transfer case is just a spline. So, like I mentioned earlier, you should just be able to take the drive shaft out from the back and slide it out from the front. What I like to do, since I'm kind of always working by myself, is I like to have some kind of jack platform or maybe a stack of blocks or something, so that as I'm taking it out, it doesn't just slam down. I can rest it on that pretty securely while I work the front end. So you can see I got the drive shaft brought down. On the rear end, I ended up using an impact driver, and that's just because with the parking brake and it lifted, this thing can rotate freely, so you don't have a good way of chalking it while you're wrenching on it. But the impact driver will take care of that for you. On this other end, it slides out real easy off of these splines. There's a lot of grease there, so it slid real easy and comes out from inside of that boot. My next step, while at least I'm set up back here, is actually to take this harmonic balancer off. There's 3 of these 14 millimeter inverted Torx bolts, so I think I'm going to take that off. That should give me a little bit more wiggle room on the back end of the transfer case as I take the transfer case and transmission down from there. So here's what the front drive shaft looks like. This is going forward into the front differential. You see I'm indexing it the same way. I've got my tick marks on it. There looks to be like 2 retainer plates, and then there are 3 of these 10 millimeter bolts sticking through, and that's the same case on both sides. This one's a little bit more difficult to see, but this is going into the transfer case. The service manual says to discard these. Same with I think all the other bolts that I've done so far. I think the reason is that these look like they have a Loctite patch applied to them, like a pre-applied Loctite on the threads of the bolt. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm not going to toss these all out. I'm going to reuse them, but I do have some of the blue Loctite I'm going to reapply when I reinstall these. Okay, so I've got the front drive shaft loose. You kind of see one of my problems here, though, is that the sway bar is actually in the way of letting me get this down. So I think I must have just glossed over that step as I was under here working instead of looking at the manual. But this is going to take there's 4 15 millimeter nuts on these, and that'll allow you to take these like horseshoe retainers off, and then my sway bar, and there's a pair on that side too. My sway bar can come down, and I can do that. I know that's a step anyways to gain better access to the bottom of the transmission here. I guess I just got ahead of myself. So let me drop that down. I'll get this drive shaft. Okay, I'm at the back end of the truck again. This is the transfer case. Our next step to kind of start freeing things up to drop the transmission, I think, is going to be focusing on the exhaust. In order to get the exhaust actually out, though, I've got to get this cross member out of the way. And right now, the transmission's bearing down on that through this mount. So what I'm going to do is bring in my platform jack, probably, or just a normal floor jack, to get the weight off the back end of this. And then what I can do is start undoing these 10 millimeter nuts that are holding on my heat shields and then this wire bracket and such, so that eventually I can drop this down underneath of this support bracket. I think these are 18 millimeters, so it's going to be a deep socket 18 millimeter nut here, and that's what this rubber mount, this isolator mount, is actually mounted onto. So these guys, I believe, on either end, there's 2 pair of them, and I think these are 15 millimeter on both ends. It's a bolt that goes all the way through to a nut on the back side. So I think that'll be my next step here, but I obviously don't want to get any of this too loosened up before getting the weight of the transfer case and the back end of the transmission off of there. So we'll get a jack set up and then start working on that. Heat shields and things will be fine to go first. Actually, I'll probably do that while I still have the room here and nothing in my way. Just a quick update here. There's one heat shield bolt coming down from the top center here into this cross member, the support member. There's the heat shield that's kind of a L-shaped piece that goes here, and there's 2 10 millimeter nuts there that secure it. There are 2 10 millimeter nuts securing this cable routing thing. And then over on this other side, it's going to be a little difficult to see because it was actually kind of hard to reach to. There's another heat shield here that has another 10 millimeter bolt coming down. This again, I think, is another heat shield that'll just stay where it's at, but you got to detach it from the cross member to bring it down. At the same time, I disconnected my back end of the muffler. So this was two 13 millimeter bolts. Luckily mine came free pretty easy. I'm hoping that's indicative of what it's going to be like up near the turbos, but probably not the case. Maybe something to keep in mind if you guys are planning to do this job. Soak the nut heads with some WD-40 or some nut breaker fluid or something like that just ahead of time. Hopefully save yourself a little bit of pain. At the same time, while I've been under here, I took out these two support bolt nuts, and that's just because the weight's bearing down. It's not going to hold anything up if I take those out. I misspoke though. I said that they were 18 millimeter. These are actually 221 millimeter nuts on this one. I don't know if it differs from truck to truck, but mine were 21s. So I think I'm probably going to turn my focus back to getting some support now underneath the rear of the transfer case. Get that eased up so I can bring this cross member down. That support is going to probably have to stay there for the rest of this project. I'm going to have to disconnect a lot of these different wiring harnesses actually on both sides and going up around the sides. But I'll kind of hit those as I come across them. The next area of my focus is going to be heading back up front on the passenger side to take out the starter motor, get all those kind of auxiliary units out of the way, get this transmission coolant interchange unit taken off to give myself a little bit more access as well. So we're only scratching the surface so far. So we've got the support member out from underneath the truck now. The rear of the transfer case is supported on my my jack stand here. I wanted to show you the cable that you've got to disconnect. This guy here, that's the one that actually is loomed together. It's kind of this wire routing all over the top of the end, or over the top of the transfer case, and then forward. There is a cable tie position back there, kind of a cable anchor. And then there's another one. I know the light's not on it, but it's right about there. Once you get those two free, then this cable harness, for at least now, is kind of complete. I know I'm going a little bit out of order from what the service manual says, but it's kind of one of those things that as I'm exposing the back end, I'm trying to treat things while I'm set up here. So cable tie there. I've got this other one up here behind the heat shield. Up there. It's pretty accessible. I know by the camera view it doesn't really look like it. So I'll take that guy out. That's attached to this bracket that you've already loosened as part of the cross member. And then to separate the exhaust, I'm going to have to get this hanger. It's kind of an integral hanger and support system. So this was on top of the cross member. It's bolted to the side of the transmission, so we'll get those bolts out. Let me see if I can get a light on there, make it a little bit better to see. Sorry about that. Let's see, so we got this bracket here. Do this balancing act. Get the cable bundle out of there. So it's these guys here. We've got two bolts there to take care of. The same thing on the other side. And you can see that your muffler actually is hanging from this, kind of this horizontal member of the muffler. So once we take those both out, this thing should come down. I'm going to keep it in the same orientation that I brought it out from and put it in my bone pile over there so that when I put it back all up, it's in the same orientation as a truck. But with those two items free, then I can go up to the forward side of the exhaust, take it down from the turbos with both catalytic converters attached together. And then I've got the two last O2 sensors to disconnect. And that should be it for the exhaust. I should be able to just drop the exhaust down then and get it out of the way. But I guess that gives me an opportunity. Here I am on the driver's side of the transmission. So I'll point out a couple things while I'm set up here. Get my light kind of set up. What I'm looking at, so this is where the front drive shaft came out of the transfer case. That little black hose is a breather tube. We're going to disconnect that. Over here in the middle We have fuel lines going over the top that are held on with a clip, so you want to unclip that. This is the O2 sensor going to the driver's side I guess it's just at the catalytic converter. We're going to disconnect these cables. This is my gear select. There are two nuts or two bolts holding this onto it, so I should be able to take those off. There's some plastic ties and things holding it in place up there, so we'll get those out of the way. And then this is my transmission fluid cooler. I think there's a couple bolts that I got to take out. This one for sure, and I think both these lines kind of come out. And then there are a few, and I've done this. I had to do this when I did the valve body. But then there are also these 13 millimeter, I think. Maybe that's a 10. There are two of them though, and that kind of holds this bracket up. So what you'll do is once you've got those two out, then this whole unit should kind of swing out and away, just like your sway bar did. And that gives you access so that you can start going up along the bell housing, taking out these 13 millimeter bolts. So this must be a 10 down here. 13 millimeter hex bolts there. They're all around the perimeter. I'll try to detail which ones are necessary or at least where they're located. See, I'm going to try to do this, at least show you kind of where I've been working. I'm on the passenger side of the transmission now. Everything on the driver's side has been taken down. I've actually already disconnected the catalytic converters from the torque or from the turbos. And those were 15 millimeter hex nuts. I think I had mentioned 13 millimeter. I was wrong. So they're 15 millimeter, and I was pleased that they came down fairly easy. They looked pretty rusted up, but actually spun free pretty easy. So now I'm on the passenger side. I've disconnected this big bulkhead connector that feeds into the back of the transmission. If I reach up along the side here, this is the O2 sensor on the passenger side exhaust, and this is actually connected right up here over top of this kind of tinfoil braided cable assembly here. So I was able to reach it and pull it free. I could feel up there for the release tab, and it came free all right. You guys might, I don't know if you can see it or reach it or not when you do this on your own, but you may have to actually lower the transmission slightly so that you can get hand access. So anyways, I guess where I'm working at now is I'm gonna focus up over here. This is my starter. On the back side of the starter, I've got some big wires coming in the back. I'll have to disconnect those. And then I've got two, maybe 15 millimeter again, two 15 millimeter or 13 millimeter. I'll let you know when I'm done. Nuts that are securing the starter from here. So once I get these two out, the starter can slide out and come down. I decided not to disconnect this yet. I didn't want it dripping on me while I was doing the rest of this work. So at least for the time being, it's still attached. But I'll get this starter out, then that should hopefully free up a little bit more room so I can get to this and the other 15 millimeter nut on the other side of this flange so that I can take down the whole exhaust and get it out of there. That should actually give me a little bit more room too to kind of work on some of this other stuff. So we'll keep on kind of working around. I see already up along the side here, there's a wire plastic clip. So I guess just be cognizant of that as you're kind of working your way around the transmission. Make sure you're disconnecting those as you see them so that you don't have any kind of snags or holdups as you're coming to pull this thing free. So we have the starter out. This came out, up, and then drops down like this. So there's two long studs that are special to the starter, and that's there. We got this side. The exhaust is all out. Actually, I mean, both sides are out, but this was my last side to do. This lower one, not so much of a problem. I could get, decent access with like kind of a long extension on my impact driver. This top side was a bit of a pain though, because the way that the pipe routes and then with this heat shielding in the way, there's no real easy access to it. So what I ended up doing was putting about 2 feet worth of extensions And, you know, coming all the way from up there with the 15 millimeter socket, almost to the point where my drill gun was way back here. So I think it actually is about here, kind of nosed up through there. So you can see, I mean, that's a decent amount of extensions. Plus, you need to have like one or two flexible bits in there so that you can kind of make that arc from down here up to here. Anyways, that's out of the way, so good job. The next thing I'm kind of looking at doing is I'm still, you know, a little hesitant to take this out because I don't want to make a mess quite yet until I know that everything else is disconnected. With the exhaust out of the way, it's pretty easy to see. You know, this is that clip I was mentioning before. Got to take that guy out. As I'm looking at this heat shield, and maybe I don't know if I can do it before the exhaust is in place, but there's only I saw a 10 millimeter bolt up here on top of this frame, and then the same over there. So I think it's only two on there. And I might take it out just to give myself a little bit more room. One thing I did notice back on these exhaust studs is that while I've been attacking everything from below, if you were looking for a little bit more access, what you could do is take out your splash guard from your passenger side front wheel well and actually come in from this direction and hit the head of this thing over here. So, I mean, that's another option. My tools and things are kind of set up right now that I was just going to keep on working on my back like this, though. So, I mean, we're getting kind of close to getting to the point where I can start loosening up the bell housing bolts. I know the manual says to remove these heat shields from around the base of the transmission. I don't think that's necessary. It doesn't buy me really anything, so I'm going to leave those on. I know that there are a few brackets, though, that hold on this oil cooler, or the transmission fluid cooler. And then I've still got the main, turn around to this driver's side now. I've still got the main connection points here. So I'll have to do these guys. But then that should swing out of the way. I'll probably make a little bit of a puddle. But everything else is free back here. I mean, we're looking back at the transfer case. I don't see anything else back here. So this my jack platform here is bearing weight. If I push up and down on it, you actually see the whole thing kind of going up and down. So my plan is once I get everything free and start doing the bell housing bolts, at that point I'll have a transmission jack underneath here. And really the big benefit of the transmission jack is that you've got knobs so that you can kind of pan and tilt it as you're coming down. We're just a little too far aft of this welded in cross member, so it's not like it'll drop straight down. So probably it has to slide back a little bit and then tilt down and then slide forward. And again, I'm not trying to take the whole transmission out. I have to separate it definitely from the engine. But to get to the torque converter, I just have to open up the bell housing enough that I can slide out the old one. Alright, so here we're at. I took off the heat shield on this side, and it almost makes it look bare on this side. So I know you can't do that until after the exhaust is out, but it definitely makes it easier to access things if that's the route you choose to do. So maybe your first, like maybe if I was going to do this again, hopefully I don't have to. Maybe my first step would be, you know, you get your drive shafts and everything out. Next step would be get your cross member out. Don't even worry about the cables and things yet until you get the exhaust out of here. I know in some cases you have to get up here anyways to get the O2 sensors and things disconnected, but the majority of these connections can probably wait until you get the heat shield out of here, and it's real easy to get access to. What I'm looking at now, though, I'll try to zoom this in a little bit, is that we have the starter motor out, and there was a little rubber plate kind of held in place by two push pins, the plastic type of push pins. If you remove that, that opens up this upper opening. And what I've got my finger on is actually one of the torque converter bolts coming through the flex plate, which is this big plate that the starter starter engages on. And so there's 4 of these nuts that can be taken out, and that will disconnect your torque converter from your flex plate of your engine. And you need to do that before you try to separate things, because if you try to separate it before you do that, what will end up happening is that the splines of the torque converter will probably stay engaged with the mating half of the transmission, and it'll just be real difficult to pull things apart. So I know I didn't mention that beforehand. I was so eager to get things detached from around here that I forgot to mention that. So the way that I'm getting access to this, though, since there's 4 of them, they're positioned 90 degrees apart from each other, is on the front side of the engine. I've got my socket plugged into the crankshaft of the engine, so I'm slowly turning it over to the point that I could actually get in and get access to those torque converter bolts. This happens to be an 18 millimeter on here. I haven't yet got a socket on this guy up here, but I think I had read that that's like a 15. It looks like a 15. Of course, I've been off all day, so we'll see what it is. I believe it's 15 though. And so I'll just kind of work myself around and get these 4. And I am thankful that I didn't end up detaching this yet, because I think this would probably be spilling on me a little bit. It's nicer to stay dry as long as we can. I did temporarily place this up though, the sway bar, so that it was kind of out of my way as I'm working on things, at least for these 4 torque converter bolts. So let me get that done, and we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, I wanted to give you guys a quick status update of where I'm at now with this. We took the transmission cooler off. It's kind of hanging down like this. I had finished up getting the torque converter separated from the flex plate of the engine, and that was up through where the starter motor comes through. And since then, I've moved my transmission jack underneath the main pan of the transmission here. I'm using a ratchet to keep it secure, because the chain that usually comes on these jacks is not, you can't get it cinched very tight. So I've got a ratchet strap. I've also got a plywood board between the two, and that's kind of to distribute the load a little bit further on that metal plate. Since these 10R80s, at least for the Fords, come with a plastic pan, I want to make sure that I'm not putting like a point load up underneath that I would puncture that. But now that I've got this jack set up, I've taken out my jack platform back here, so it's not supporting the transfer case like it had been before. So it really is right now just up to this jack stand, and then obviously the bell housing bolts. On this side, I'm on the passenger side, so I can hit 2 of these. There's 2 15 millimeter bolts, this guy and then that one up there, that are on this side. With the oil or the transmission coolant out of the way, I've got a bolt there that I can hit. So there's 3 of them. I believe what I had read was 3 across the top, and then on the other side I'll kind of show you what I can with the camera. I probably won't be able to show you what I'm doing with the top ones, just because I can't get a camera in there. But from what I had seen of, the other YouTube video that I had referenced, I think a combination of extensions on my impact driver, kind of like what I had to do with this exhaust manifold on this side, or the exhaust after the catalytic on this side. It's probably going to be something like that, where I'm going to have the gun way back here, pushing a rod up that way to kind of take on the curvature of the transmission. So I'll let you know how it ends up working out. For now, though, we're just going to hit these easy ones and then move over to the other side. Okay, now I'm on the driver's side. I found that there are 3 of the bolts going into the top of the bell housing, 2 of which actually are into a metal bracket. Let me see. That holds the fuel lines in place. So I won't be able to get a good picture, but it's up in this area. I thought at first, like I said, that maybe you'd use a long set of sockets, but I ended up just using my medium size ratchet to break them free, and then was able to use my tiny ratchet with a 13 millimeter socket to actually get my hand up and around to work them loose. Luckily in my case, none of these seem to be seized. They seem to be coming out pretty easy. So there's the two on the other side, two on the top on the other side, one on the bottom, one on the top on this side, and now I've only got 4 more to go, and then that should be it. I know that there are 2 kind of like dowel pins that help locate the bell housing onto the engine, so that might be all that's kind of keeping you from moving laterally. It's a good time probably to double check that your jack stand and everything is secure. I'm going to probably work in a way where I take out these 2 at like far ends and then work the last 2 of these middle ones just so that it's kind of easiest for me to get to. And then my hope is that I can move it back gently just far enough to clear those dowel pins and start kind of nosing it down to get it out of here. Now I know that if you were to remove the whole transmission, your truck would need to be up a lot higher than this, but since I don't actually need to get it out of this kind of chasm in the middle of the body, I should be able to get it far enough back that I can get the new torque converter and kind of slide it up and put it into. Well, to be honest, guys, it was a little anticlimactic, so I got those last couple of bolts out. It wasn't moving at all, so I let a little pressure off of the jack stand, allow it to sag backwards, and I think that kind of unsealed it, and then now I can pretty freely roll it backwards. It seems like it's going to go pretty well. I just wanted to give you a quick look of what it looks like inside there, though. The dowels that I was referring to earlier, I know you're in the shadow, sorry, are these guys up here. So there's one on either side. You'll use that to locate things as you put it back into place. I'm pleased also that you can see that the torque converter didn't pull out or anything when I was when I was starting to take the transmission apart, so I should have a good feel that where it's at is where it needs to be. All right, quick status check. So I don't know, it's probably a half an hour or so jimmying this transmission down, and it is a very kind of tedious thing. You know, you're lowering it. You go like this to bring the front down, lower it, bring the front down, lower it to bring the front down. You know, you're kind of going like this, and then once you get it the nose far enough down that it clears the cooler and everything, then you can scoot it forward and then bring the bottom down and then let the whole thing settle. With the transmission stand that I'm using right now, it's not like a low profile one, so I don't know, it's probably sitting like 6 or 8 inches up off the ground. I definitely couldn't clear the chassis right now, the frame. If I were to try to take the transmission all the way out, I'd have to get like a low profile one or jack the truck up taller. I mean, you can see that my pretty standard jack stands are almost maxed out. It at least gives me enough access that I can fully have a look at this torque converter, pop the old one out and get the new one in. So that satisfies what I intended to do. All in all, I think I'm at about probably 5 hours of working on this today to get to this point. I probably will get a little bit into putting it back together. I don't know. I'm kind of. Well, guys, sorry about the audio on that one. I was having some problems with my iPhone's microphone. Whatever reason, it crackles in and out, especially when I'm crawling underneath the truck. So you saw how I was able to get the transmission separated enough to get the torque converter exposed. I think we'll call it a day for this video. It's getting kind of long. But we'll post another one here shortly, and I'll show you how I got the new torque converter in, and some of the thoughts I had with putting it back together, along with the torque specs and things that I was able to find in the service manual. So thanks for watching. Aside from the poor audio, feel free to leave comments below, and we'll see you on the next one.